But I'm really excited about today because we're bringing this series that we've been in for, today's our 5th week together, to a close, that I've entitled, God, Are You There? Which personally I believe is a question, it's probably the most important question that we all wrestle with in life, isn't it? We all ask this question probably when we're young, as we look at things, as well as throughout the years of our life. And we just want answers to that. Is God real? Is he there? And so today I'm excited that Shondra is joining me because in our discussion this morning, we're going to have a conversation around faith and science. And the reason for that is Shondra is not only Shondra Miller, but she's also Dr. Shondra Miller. And so Shondra, as we jump in this morning, I want to ask you to share a little bit about your family, your background, and what you've been up to lately with your career.
Perfect. And I'm not a doctor that helps people, so if anybody, with the heart thing, if that happens, that's not me. That's not I'm a PhD doctor.
You just spilled tea there about my heart
sorry.
thing.
Well,
okay.
Everybody kind of knows.
Yeah,
Okay, so this is a picture of my family. I have Ryan. It's my husband. We've been married for 18 years. Just last week, we celebrated our 18th year anniversary, and then we have 3 beautiful
we
kiddos.
Celebrate that, right? 18 years they're together. They love each other. That's amazing.
And then we have these 3 kiddos. So Jace is 11, Griffin in the red is 9, and Sloan is our bonus baby at 4.
Oh, bonus baby. Okay.
Bonus baby.
That's awesome.
And COVID baby. And so, I know.
We won't go down that path.
Anyways, so a little bit about myself. So I am born and raised in Springdale, Arkansas. So that is the northwest corner, whoop pigs. Northwest corner, even though they lose all the time. Northwest corner of Arkansas. And so I went to the University of Arkansas and I got my bachelor's of science in biology there, and I had my first taste for research. And so I studied mitosis, which is the process of one cell becoming 2 cells when I was an undergrad. And then I went to the University of Texas Southwestern in Dallas, Texas, and I got my PhD in cell and molecular biology, which sounds very fancy. And then after graduate school, I went to St. Louis, and I worked at a company called Sigma Aldrich, and then I started a center called the Genome Engineering and iPSC Center at Washington University. And then in 2017, I moved here to take a job at St. Jude, where I started the Center for Advanced Genome Engineering.
Okay. Y'all have all that down? That's right. She's had a little bit of schooling, okay? We're so glad you came here in 2017, for sure. The church, St. Jude, all of it. So today, we are going to go down this path, having this conversation around faith and science, and I'll get into it by sharing something with all of you that I shared with Shondra. I think it was a little over a month ago. I was at home. I was flipping through the Netflix and all the stuff, and I stumbled upon a couple of movies that I watched back when they were released. I haven't seen them, I don't think, since then, and they're some of my favorite movies, but the movie Sherlock Holmes. Are there any fans of Sherlock Holmes here today? Anyone else like them? Okay, yeah, so I'm not the only nerd in the house. That's good. Do you like Sherlock Holmes? Okay, good, yeah. And so this is, of course...
I think you just called me a nerd.
Well, we both are. We both are. But Sherlock Holmes, of course, with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law, not the Watson and Holmes version. Have y'all seen that one with Will Ferrell? Okay, that's fun too. But as I was watching these films, what I loved about it was that Holmes, or Sherlock, is always in these complex cases. And what he does is he strings together clues along the way that at the end, he gives the great reveal where he solves the case. But there was a statement that he makes in one of the films, and I'll show this to you, where he said, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And it's a profound statement, I think, because it applies to so many things in life, but what he was doing and what he does in these films is he just discards stuff that he knows is impossible. And at the end, whatever is left on the table, he said, this, even though it may be improbable, is the truth. And so throughout this series from week 1 through today, what we've looked at, or we've really tried to string together clues about God, are you there? We've looked at it from the fine-tuning of the universe and how everything's set just so for life to be permissible here on this planet. We've also talked about the reliability of the scriptures, evil and suffering. When we go through bad things and hard times, is God there? What does that speak to as far as a Christian view of God? Eddie did a phenomenal job last week speaking to the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. And today, we're going to dive into DNA, because this is your area of expertise. And so as we do this, will you begin by giving us what I know is going to be I called it in the first service a crash course. Will you begin setting that up and walking us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I have slides because that's how I do science, is I always have pictures to point at. And so just bear with me for some of these slides. So taking a big picture, our human bodies, as you guys probably know, are made up of organ systems. And those organ systems are made up of organs, and those organs are made up of tissues, and those tissues are made up of cells. And inside those cells are things called organelles, and you can kind of think about those as organs inside of the cell. So they're little specialized compartments inside of the cell. And so I have a picture here of the cell. It's the second to the, I don't know why it's very confusing to me. It's on the left, second to the left. There's a red circle, and that is the nucleus. And the nucleus is where the DNA or the genome is stored within the cell. And you can think about DNA or the genome as the instruction manual for whatever that DNA is inside. So if you were looking at a strawberry cell, you would say that the DNA inside of that is the instruction manual for how to make a strawberry. Similarly, if you look inside of a human cell, it has the instruction manual of how to make a human. And so I have a video that I was going to show you that kind of likens the code of the genome to the code in a computer or the code in your smartphone. So we're going to watch this short video. It's short, and then we'll come back.
Our bodies are more like computers than you may realize. Computers and other electronic devices like cell phones function by following a set of instructions called code. Computer engineers write code to tell devices exactly what to do and how to respond and behave. Our bodies follow a set of code as well. In living things, that code is called DNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It was first observed by Swiss biologist Friedrich Miescher in 1869. Our bodies are full of long, thin DNA molecules that tell our cells what to do. In 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick discovered that a DNA molecule is shaped like a double helix. Imagine a tall ladder, like one you would use to climb up to the roof of a building, but twisted into a spiral. If you could unravel all of the DNA molecules in your body and lay them end to end, it would reach the sun and back several times. DNA molecules are made of nucleotides that stretch between a spiraling backbone like the rungs on a ladder. There are 4 different types of nucleotides: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. These nucleotides are represented by their first letters, A, T, C, and G. A person's DNA code can be written out using different combinations of these letters. There are only 4 letters, but there are billions of possible code combinations. A long strand of these coded instructions is called a gene. Genes tell cells how to make proteins. These proteins allow the cells to function, grow, and survive. A long chain of DNA and proteins is called a chromosome. Chromosomes are found at the center of each cell in the nucleus. Each human has 23 different pairs of chromosomes. Our chromosomes are inherited from our parents. They determine genetic traits such as hair color, eye color, height, and even whether you are a boy or a girl. DNA is what makes us who we are. Although there are billions of different DNA code combinations, humans share 99.9% of their DNA with all other humans on Earth. We are only different from one another by 0.1%. But that is enough to make us all one of a kind.
Okay, did y'all get all that? You're going to be quizzed on this after kids thought they were out of school. They're actually going to be quizzed on this. No, so this is helpful, even for guys like me. But tell us more. Dig into this a little bit for us.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of people are remembering sleeping through high school biology right now, but just stay with me for a little bit longer. I'm going to go through a couple things, but I'm going to try to keep it interesting. So we talked about the genome and DNA as the instruction manual for how to make a human cell, if it's inside of a human cell. They talked about how long it is and how much information is in there. It's literally 3 billion with a B base pairs long. And that is maybe hard for you to conceptualize, so I'm going to have a slide that shows you this guy standing in front of a printed genome. So basically, if you took the DNA inside of a cell and you printed it out, it comes out with these encyclopedia-looking things, if you remember what encyclopedias are. And each of those volumes has a 1 or a 2. Those are the chromosome numbers that those volumes coincide or are basically for. And then on the right-hand side, you can see there's a book that's open, and that's one of those books pulled off the shelf and opened up, and you can see that it's in 4-point font, so it's teeny, teeny, tiny. And so if you wanted to just read this genome, the instruction manual for how to make a cell, those 3 billion base pairs, if you said every letter, three letters every second, AGT, TTT, CCC, you didn't sleep, you didn't go to the bathroom, you just said it all the time, you didn't eat, it would take you over 30 years to say it, just to read that. So that's a lot of information within each one of our cells. A thing that is mind-boggling to me is that inside of each of those cells, that we have that 3 billion base pairs, but the cell can divide and replicate its genome in 6 hours. So it takes us 30 years, over 30 years to just say it, but a cell can make it another copy in 6 hours. So it's pretty remarkable. So again, the instruction manual, the genome, even mistakes in this genome can lead to disease. And so this is really what my research has studied, is how do we go in and fix those genetic mutations that lead to disease so that we can cure folks of their genetic disease instead of just giving them a drug for the rest of their lives. So if that wasn't complicated enough, inside of each one of your cells, there is this complete copy of the genome. But you guys can look around. My hair doesn't look the same as my skin cells, right? And so it's complicated in the fact that although all of that whole instruction manual is inside of the cells, some of the genes, some of those pieces of information are turned on in different cells, and some of them are turned off. And the cell and biology and life is really amazing in the way that it does this. And so now I'm going to keep you with me. I'm going to give you another slide and a schematic. I think it's maybe my last one, maybe not. And it's called the central dogma of biology. Do you guys remember this? It's central, like you should know it. No?
Right.
Okay, dogma? Okay, anyways, it is really like if you're in high school, you're like, oh my gosh. So we talk about this a lot in biology class. So why do we talk about it? It's basically how does the cell know which genes and proteins, which proteins to make in which types of cells and at what time. So I'm going to use a kind of gross oversimplification analogy. The DNA here is that instruction manual we've been talking about. But let's think about it like a blueprint for a whole city, not just a building, not just a house, but the whole city and everything that's inside of it. That's equivalent to like the DNA inside of the nucleus. In the cell, that information is transcribed into RNA. So going back to my blueprint, don't stick with me, that blueprint or that might be locked away in an architect's office, right? You want to keep it safe. You don't want anybody to spill coffee on it. You want it to be locked away and safe and sound. And you're not going to just pass it out to everybody. You're going to only give them the pieces that they need to know. So the cell does something very similar. It transcribes that blueprint or the pieces of that blueprint into what's called RNA. So in this analogy, maybe we need to make a staircase. And so we're going to just make a copy of the blueprint, and we're going to give some copies to the carpenters that need to make those blueprints. And so the last step is translation. So basically, you're taking those blueprints for those stairs, and you're making stairs, right? So the equivalent in a cell is you take that RNA, those copies, and then you make a protein. And so that is really how we get genes turned on, turns off, the right proteins made in the right cells at the right time. And it's a pretty complicated process. But oh wait, it gets better for $9.99. No, just kidding. It gets more complicated because inside of those cells, if you think about a blueprint, right? I told you, you're probably thinking stairs, windows, buildings, sidewalks, bridges. You're thinking about innate things. You're not thinking about things that are alive. In the blueprint of DNA, it has to make the workers. So the workers inside of a cell are called enzymes. They're the ones that are doing the building. So it's really remarkable that all this information is inside of that genome. And then the last layer of complexity is that DNA has to replicate itself. So all the information to make the DNA and to make more of the DNA and those little enzymes to make the DNA is inside of that blueprint. And I'm going to blow your mind with one more fact. Yes? You ready? All right. So in order for your bodies to grow from like a baby to an adult, you obviously have to make more cells, right? And we've talked about the blueprints are inside the cells. right now, inside of your bodies, in the course of the hour that you've been here since we started singing, you're going to make over 7 billion with a B red blood cells in your body. So you guys are really busy even whenever you're just sitting here looking at us.
So you aren't working at church right now.
You're working.
Right?
Yeah.
That's crazy. All right, so that's the crash course of understanding the complexity of DNA. When I read through, and I've read a lot of material, we've discussed a number of things as well. There's a book, or some books really, that's written by Dr. Stephen Meyer that you and I both had some conversations around. And Dr. Stephen Meyer has an extensive background in science, but also the philosophy of science, how we approach science and study this material world. And he wrote something I thought was pretty fascinating, and I'll share this with you, where he said this. He said, the information contained in an English sentence or computer software does not derive from the chemistry of the ink or the physics of magnetism, but from a source extrinsic to the physics and chemistry altogether. Indeed, in both cases, the message transcends the properties of the medium. The information in DNA also transcends the properties of its material medium. Okay, so kind of a mind-bending statement in what he's saying, but as we kick this around, I think the way maybe I can speak to this is by just taking this piece of paper that I'm holding to keep us on track with what we're talking about. And so I have the paper, I have the ink, and then I have the letters that are all in a certain order or sequence to spell words that then give and create a thought or present a thought. And so in taking what Dr. Meyer says is he looks at DNA, and he is a Christian, by the way. What he is saying here is that the paper, the medium, and the ink, they need an intelligence behind them to actually take it and put them together in a particular pattern or form in order to convey a thought or to produce the words on a page. The paper is not going to produce it in itself. The ink's not going to produce it. There's no magnetism or anything to pull the letters together and sequence them, but it has to have an intelligence or a mind behind it. Did I say that clearly, or to you?
I don't know, I think so.
Yeah,
I
hopefully
think,
so.
I think you did. And then when I think about that the quote is really, we read it, and he said it. I was like, he said he was going to say it. It's like, that's really like complicated. And I think he did a great job of simplifying it. But I think the same thing is true with DNA, right? I just told you a little crash course about DNA. But the sheer complexity and the specificity of DNA really challenge a purely random explanation. Like, how could this have truly randomly come about? And if you think about, we were talking about code and computers. Even Bill Gates has compared DNA to code, and he said, it's more complicated than the most complicated code that anybody has ever written. That last part that anybody has ever written is important, right? Code has a coder, and so I think that's how I kind of think about DNA.
Yeah. So it doesn't just happen. No one looks at this paper with these words and says, oh, that just happened over time and it just happened randomly. But no, there's an intelligence behind it. And as you look at DNA, the coding that then leads to everything you just told us, does it seem to you that it points to, as a clue pointing to a designer or a God?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's I don't know of any highly dense information system that didn't have a creator, like that didn't have a mind that put that intelligent or that information down.
That's good. Okay. All right, so let's get from the weeds somewhat up into a little bit higher level here. And what I'd like for you to do is we've talked about just where you stand and where I am personally as well, that we do believe that faith and science come together. That in fact, that there are some discoveries that have taken place over quite some time that are clues pointing to a designer, to a creator. And so will you share with everyone some of these discoveries that you find compelling?
Yeah, so another schematic for you guys, or another slide for you guys. So really over the last 100 years, there have been some major discoveries, scientific discoveries that are well believed in the field. And those three that are really convincing to me are, one is the beginning of the universe. So it is well understood that there was a finite moment when the universe came into existence. And that idea, it was a new one about 120 years ago, 1920s, I think was whenever this really started becoming an idea that there was a finite universe. Before this, scientists really thought that the universe was eternal, like it had been in existence all forever. And so that idea and that understanding that we had a finite beginning to our universe really points to what started it, right? So that's a question that you have to wrestle with, and I believe that points to a creator or a mind that started that. The second one is the fine-tuning of the universe. And so Jonathan did a great job on one of those, I think it was the first sermon of the series, about how the physical constants of our universe are so finely tuned exactly the way they need to be in order for life to exist. And even a fine fraction of a fraction of a fraction deviation from those constants would not allow life to survive as we know it. And then the last one is DNA, which we've been talking about, and I hope I've impressed upon you how complicated it is and how much information is really stored inside of each one of our cells, and I think that really, really makes us special.
To me, it just seems overwhelming. And I've heard some people say before that I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, and it's because they look at science in part, and they just see these certain things that you just did such a good job of laying out. They say, this seems to point me to this. There is a creator who's put all this together and holds it all together. As I was reading through all this and, of course, listening to you share this, there were two scriptures that came to mind. And the first one I want to show you all is from 1 Corinthians, where the Apostle Paul wrote this about God. He said, God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. And I love that because, again, you have to stop and think about it, don't you? But what he's getting at is that even God's foolishness, which he is not foolish whatsoever, at the peak of our wisdom doesn't come close to the brilliance of God. And even on the strength and weakness, and God's weakness and our greatest strength as human beings does not get close. That this God, as Paul looked back 2,000 years and reflected on God and what he understood in science, which was minimal compared to what we know today, he was blown away and just saying, oh my gosh, God is so otherworldly. But not only did I think of that, when I thought of one from Isaiah where God declares to us about himself. And Isaiah the prophet wrote this, and this is God through him. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. And this is just God speaking to us through this prophet. And he's saying, now listen, let me just tell you, we all struggle with getting a little proud and a little arrogant from time to time, think we're smarter and brighter than what we really are. And God's just saying, here's what you need to know. My thoughts are way up here, yours are way down here. My ways. That there's this mystery to life, and if we ever feel like we have a corner on it and we understand it all, this is just, I think, a really good reminder. And I think even when we were talking about DNA in your studies, you told me last week on the phone, you brought up junk DNA. And junk DNA, they have believed up to a point that is just worthless. Just throw it out, kind of like our tonsils and other things, right? But then they start discovering, actually, there's more to it, that there's needs. And you shared with me, even with all your study, you're still learning. And so as we're still digging in and studying, I think these scriptures are such a good reminder to sober us up, humble us, and kind of put our feet back down on the earth, whenever we get a little proud. All right, so with that, I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about your view of the fear of God towards science, science toward God. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think those verses are great. And I think that it really points to that God is not afraid of science, right? And he made science, he made us, and so he's not afraid of it, and that's okay. And I think that science should not be afraid of God, and I think that these things can really work together. They actually have to work together. And when I think about things, if we have science and God or faith that are in conflict, we've interpreted something incorrectly, because I know that they have to work together because I believe so strongly in both. I'm also reminded of a Proverbs 19:2, which says, zeal without knowledge is not good. And what this speaks to me is that God wants us to be inquisitive. He wants us to think about things. He wants us to ask the tough questions. He doesn't want us just to blindly believe things. He really wants us to struggle with things and to have faith and ask good questions.
That's so good. Yeah, I love that when you wrote that, and I read it the other day, where you just said, God is not afraid of science. And science really, and those that take science seriously, should not be afraid of God either. That they are compatible. They can complement each other, of course, express and help us better understand the other. Okay, so as we begin now to try to land the plane, and we're going to do this, I think, swiftly, I want to just let you share a little bit about your journey, your personal journey with Christianity, and then also your world of science as you went into that, moved into that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was raised in a Christian home. My dad owned his own business, and I saw him. He taught me the value of working hard, really working hard for things. My mom was always very curious, and she was the mom that would get you up at 2 in the morning, even if you didn't want to get up, and say, there's a meteor shower, let's go outside, and it's freezing out cold outside. And she really taught me to be curious and inquisitive about nature and in being awe of God's creation. And so those two things, hard work and curiosity, really led me into going into science because I was curious about things, and it does take a lot of hard work. And I became a believer at 12, so I was very young. And when I started learning about biology and DNA, I didn't have any conflict with that, right? Like I was definitely looking at it through the view of God created us, and this is DNA, and it just fit. It was fine. I had no problems with it. But when I got to college and when I got to graduate school, I started feeling this tension. And I don't think that the tension, when I look back at it, it wasn't really internal tension or tension with God and my faith. It was more tension, I think, because the church was very skeptical of science, and science people were very skeptical of faith. And so that created a lot of tension that I don't think necessarily, or I don't think should exist. I think they can really coexist.
Yeah, and as we discussed this with my upbringing in the church, my dad was a pastor, and so my earliest memories are standing on a pew with my parents singing songs in church, which are pretty cool. But the same was true for me. Growing up in the church, it seemed to me that certain subjects were taboo. So there was these beliefs about certain things, and then if you brought anything up as a possibility of how God may have created or how he went about creating, they always seemed to get pressed down and said, no, that's going too far this direction. And another subject, and I shared this with you the other day, that I think a lot about from my childhood and up through maybe even my college years, that in the church, there was always this pushback, not only on the creation side, but also what we call mental health today, where everyone would say, no, you don't get off into that stuff and medicine and those that are professionals in this field. And so they would try to push that down. And today, thankfully, I believe more of us are saying, hold on, we don't have to draw lines. We can just bring them together. And what you had to say about interpreting is so important because they do mix. But you, in your journey, you have had some challenges at times with how the two do come together. Will you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think a lot of people just have a lot of faith, and I have a lot of questions. I have questions about my questions, and some of my community groups over here, and they're like, oh yeah, she does. And my husband also, whenever I wake up, and I'm like, I have a lot of questions for you, and he's like, just give me a minute. So I do. I think God put inside of me those questions, and I think that I have at times felt guilty about that and thought, oh, I can't have questions, or it means I'm not a Christian, or it means my faith is not strong. But there are a few things that give me peace. And there's this quote that I found from Paul Tillich, which is a theologist, who said, doubt isn't the opposite of faith. Doubt is an element of faith. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is really beautiful to me. The other story actually is found in Mark 9 that really gives me comfort whenever I'm struggling with doubt or faith. And the story, if you guys probably remember it, is this father who has a boy that's been sick since childhood. He brings him to Jesus and he says, if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And Jesus responds, if you can, everything is possible for one who believes. And then the father immediately cries out, I believe, help with my unbelief. And that's a prayer that I have often is, I believe, but help me with my unbelief. And I think that's good. And I think God is okay with that. And he's telling us he's okay with that. Yeah.
In my own way, I've definitely done that. And sometimes it's, as you said, questions you can't really put the 2 and 2 together to equal 4. So you're trying to sort all that out. But other times it's just life is so difficult. It's so confusing. There's so much chaos that you just can't make sense of it. Sometimes I feel like I'm taking, clown pills and just going, what is going on? But it's that prayer, like you said. Hey, I believe, I trust you, but help me with my unbelief. That's so good. Share a little bit about how science uses, or how science in many ways, or what you do, is used to bring you closer to God.
Yeah, so I talk about my husband because, 18 years. I love him very much. He feels close to God when he's in nature, right? Like he's hiking in the mountains or he sees a beautiful sunset. He likes to get away and be close to God. And I like that too, and I feel that as well. But I really feel the beauty and the complexity of DNA and the complexity inside of a single cell. Those small things, that really brings me closer to God, being able to see his fingerprints on not only the vastness of the universe, but also the tiny building blocks of life. And so those things really make me feel like, oh yeah, there you are.
That's good. Yeah. Mine may be a little bit of both, I think. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so how would you encourage everyone today? Is just some of your parting thoughts, I think you have a quote as well to share. How would you encourage everyone here who's a Christian, but also some of those are a little more cerebral and they tend to think and have all the why questions, struggle with doubt? What would you share with them?
I think be curious. Stay curious. God wants you to be curious. And so I would think for the Christians, don't be afraid of science. Engage with science. Listen to what the newest discoveries are. Think about how they affect you and how what their implications might be and how you can interpret them. And then for those folks that are into science, I would say be open-minded to other options, other hypotheses, especially about creation. And then I do have this, there's a scientist, I don't know if you've heard of him, named Albert Einstein. He has this quote that I'm going to put up on the board that says, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." And so I think that can be really encouraging to us.
That's so good. Yeah, and as we were talking about his statement, the thing that came to mind to me as well is that as we go through these things and we are curious, pray a lot more. Because I know for me, and you guys may be this way as well, but I'll see things, I get complexities and questions, and I just sometimes just stuff them and carry them around more than praying. But I have found that when we go to God, who is so wise, so brilliant, who the Spirit dwells within us, and we just share these raw, true, heartfelt questions and concerns or whatever, he does give you wisdom a lot. He does help bring peace. And sometimes he doesn't resolve the issue or the question, but he does give you a peace in the midst of it that he's with you, which is so important. Okay, so as we get ready to wrap up today, I hope this has been encouraging to all of you. And how about we thank Shondra for sharing with us this morning? We could have spent a lot more time, and I know for all of you as well as for me, our computational power would probably start fritzing out if we talked more down this path of DNA, so you're welcome for that. But as we do close, thinking through all this, I had this statement, or it's a scripture from thousands of years ago that King David wrote as he reflected upon his life in God. And to me, this resonates deeply with some of what we talked about today. And I want to look at this with you from Psalm 139. He wrote this. He said, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." And I love that because even with the limited amount of insights that King David had back then, with the wisdom he had that God gave him by the Spirit, that as he reflected on his life, he just looks at it and says, "I praise you. You are this great God. You created me. You're all powerful." The complexities, as we've looked at now, down to the cellular level with DNA, the coding, as you said, the source code for how things are to work for us to even be here, for our bodies to exist and function. Yes, we recognize that, but we also turn to the heavens, we praise him, and we thank him that not only is he an all-powerful God, he's an all-loving God. And I think that's what I hope that all of you will walk away with today, is that he wants for us to look to him and just know that he loves us and thank him and praise him for being so good to us. Now, to put an exclamation point on this, the good news of Jesus Christ, the gospel, is all about the Son of God leaving the heavens to come here to share this truth, these truths about who this Creator is with us. And ultimately, as Eddie shared last week, that the resurrection of Jesus historically took place, guys. And because of that reality, we all need to wrestle with, if Jesus died, rose from the dead, and he is back, it proves that who he claimed to be, and all the miracles and all the teachings are things we need to take seriously. And from that, he points us to our Father in heaven. And he said, we're all created to live as sons and daughters of God. So our response to this should be surrender. It's right where we are with everything that we have in life, just saying, God, here's my life, and here's all my heart, and give your life to him.